For this Monday message, I will read a bit about the Vangelo della Streghe, a little bit more like explained, and this is written by Reverend Donald Lewis from the Carlin tradition, so I think it's lovely. And so Introduction to the Vangelo della Streghe, and also it's full moon now, so I feel like it's a great time to do this now. One of the most sacred pieces of Wiccan literature is the Vangelo della Streghe. This is a collection of legends preserved and passed down by generations of Arabian witches of Italy. A little over a century ago, the Italian witch Maddalena gave a copy of the Vangelo to the famed folklorist Charles Godfrey Leland on the understanding that he would publish it. The most important part of the Vangelo is the creation story it contains. This creation story is sublime allegorical account of the creation of the physical world and the descent of spirit into matter. I will just continue. The story touches on very ancient themes and is reminiscent of the Greek myth of Ophion and Erinon and the creation myth of the goddess Cybele. You must understand, however, that the stories in the Vangelo are meant to be understood as allegory, which is to say that these stories represent their subject symbolically, portraying it in familiar everyday forms rather than with abstract concepts. If you try to read these stories literally, they appear rather shallow and foolish. Only by understanding that the Vangelo's human characters actually represent the timeless forces of nature and the universe, and that their actions portray the cosmic processes, can you hope to get anything out of it. Maddalena did not bother to explain this. She was willing to let people know more about the ancient Arabian Wiccan traditions, but she didn't want them to know too much. She knew that people who understood allegory would be able to read between the lines and appreciate what they found there. She is also supposed to have made certain alterations to the text, apparently for the purpose of secrecy, which leaves some confusion in the original text. But despite this, the text is of enormous value. Creation in the Vangelo. According to the Vangelo della Streghe, Diana was the first created of all creation. In her were all things. In other words, Diana, or goddess, is primeval deity. She existed before the first beginning as chaos. God without form, existing in a void and having within herself the seeds of all things, both spiritual and material, all mixed up without order or definition. Primeval deity is androgynous, having both feminine spirit or yin and masculine matter or yang elements, and is more times portrayed as such in myth and artwork. Is sometimes, did I say that? Other times, however, primeval deity is portrayed as feminine, since we think of primeval deities in association with the goddess. Indeed, as the higher self of the goddess. In this sense, primeval deity is identified with the crone goddess, the goddess in her aged state, having existed from before the dawn of time. This is the wisest and most knowing part of goddess, most commonly called Hecate. This is the goddess portrayed with greater or lesser respect as the Halloween's witch with pointed hat and broom. For endless eons, primeval deity existed in the amorphous and undifferentiated state in the darkness before the first creation. At first aware of nothing, she slept, resting and recharging, gathering her energies, and merely being alone and complete in herself. But over the course of time, primeval deity began to stir, to become aware. First she became aware of her own existence. In time she began to think, to dream, to question, and to desire. She wondered, what would it be like to feel? What would it be like to move, to take action, to be able to receive sensation, to see, to taste, to hear? And so for eons primeval deity thought and considered and wondered, and then out of herself, the first darkness, she divided herself. Into darkness and light she was divided. The God, her brother and son, herself and her other self, was the light. Primeval deity divided herself, one became two. All of the physical, tangible and volatile parts of primeval deity went into the God, who was the light. The God exploded into existence out of primeval deity in a shower of spark and flame that we remember as the Big Bang, the starting point of physical creation. All of the spiritual, ethereal and eternal parts of primeval deity remained in the goddess. In this sense, the goddess is thought of as a continuation of primeval deity, since the consciousness of primeval deity is one of the spiritual parts that remained with her. The God spread out in all directions through the primordial void, a blaze of light and superheated matter. In time his fire would cool into stars, and from stars into planets. As this happens, the vibration of the matter slows and it becomes more dense, seemingly solid. This slowing, cooling and solidifying is described as falling into matter. Symbolically, the God is described as having fallen into 7 planes of existence. Some people say there are more, but since the divisions are not as exact as all that, the number is not as important as the concept. 7 is the ancient number based on the idea of the 7 Ptolemaic planets, that is, the sun, the moon, and those planets visible with the naked eye. The 7 planes are, from the lowest up, physical, emotional, mental, astral, solar or egoic, monadic, and divine. We will talk more about these later, or in this book. The 7 planes are also sometimes called the 7 spheres or the 7 dimensions, all refer to the same basic concept. The Vangelo continues, and when Diana saw that the light was so beautiful, the light which was her other half, her brother the God, she yearned for it with exceedingly great desire, wishing to receive the light again into her darkness, to swallow it up in rapture, in delight. She trembled with desire, and this trembling was the first dawn. But the God's light fled from her and would not yield to her wishes. He was the light which flies into the most distant parts of heaven, the mouse which flies before the cat. Seeing the beauty of the God, that is, of the physical universe, the goddess was entranced and with desire, and she wanted it back. She had dreamed of seeing and tasting and doing, but being separate from the God, she could not do none of this. She could only observe from the outside that which she had created. The goddess wanted the experience she had dreamed of, and so she desired to take the created universe back into herself. But it wasn't that easy. The Vangelo tells how the goddess went to the oldest part of herself, primeval deity, who was still within her. The Vangelo calls primeval deity the mothers and fathers who were before the first creation. which emphasizes primeval deity's androgynous aspect. In other words, the goddess consulted her own higher self. In many ancient myths, notably the story of Demeter and Persephone, this same process is shown by the goddess entering Hecate's cave to take counsel from the eldest and wisest part of deity. In the Vangelo, Diana asks primeval deity how she can reunite with the god, how spirit could take matter back into herself. And the ancient one, primeval deity, the goddess's own higher self, answered in this way: to rise you must fall. To become the greatest of all goddesses, you must first become a mortal. In other words, it was not possible for spirit simply to take matter back. If the goddess wished to reunite with the god, to be one with matter and experience it, she had to enter into the physical world. Only in that way could the goddess and the god reunite. And so Diana fell. That is to say, she descended through the 7 planes to the physical. She did this by dividing off parts of herself, the many souls, which she sent into the physical and placed into physical forms. Each soul was to lead many lifetimes, going through many physical forms in the process. Reading this now or hearing this now, you are one of the lifetimes of one of those souls that are part of the great goddess. We are her children, and we are also children of the god, for our existence is the accomplishment of their union. The Vangelo describes this process in extremely symbolic terms. It tells how Diana took the form of a cat, the soul entering into material form, and in this way got close to the god. Then, resuming her own form, she made passionate love to him. Then, to maintain the union of spirit and matter, the goddess cast a spell. She sang a charm, and her voice was as the buzzing of bees. And then Diana sat at her spinning wheel and began to spin the thread of life, and the god turned the wheel. In other words, having placed soul inside matter, the goddess used the power of sound, that is vibration, to set the universe as we know it into motion. Energy is what holds all things together, from subatomic particles to galaxies of stars. The vibration of that energy, its movement, sometimes described as its frequency, is what makes it work and determines on what level it works. The denser or more physical a thing is, the lower its vibration or frequency is said to be. The more spiritual the energy, the higher its vibration is said to be. Vibration is comparable to sound, which can be a powerful magical tool. For this reason, the vibration of the universe at different frequencies through each of the 7 planes of spheres is often described as the music of the spheres. Music and song have long been used in many spiritual traditions as a means of affecting the vibration of energy. Sound can be used in this way to disperse negative or unfocused energy, to break down psychic blockages, and to create or affect specific energetic forms. Sound is a very powerful tool precisely because sound or vibration is the very force the goddess used to set the wheel of life into motion. Called the goddess's spinning wheel in the Vangelo della Streghe, the wheel of life is a very ancient concept. It is represented annually by the sacred wheel of the year. From this wheel, the goddess spirit spins the thread of life. That is, she determines its nature and qualities, the lessons to be learned and the things to be done and accomplished, the destiny, if you will. But the God, matter, or perhaps more precisely physical experience, turns the wheel. As the goddess is the nature of life, the God is the process of living, the movement through the planes of existence. The goddess is the essential nature of the universe and of life itself. She provides the divine spark that animates all things. But God carries that spark forward. The God is Lord of space and time, master of the temporal universe. In this aspect, he is called the Lord of the dance, for he leads the dance of life, facilitating experience and growth. In this way, their essence originating from the goddess and their ability to move and grow originating from the God, the many souls descended to the physical plane. The goal of this, as stated above, or before here, was to experience, to learn and grow. Having arrived in the physical, the soul set out to learn all that the physical plane could teach them, and they then began their ascent back up through the 7 planes to ultimately rejoin with the goddess, from whence they came. Each plane has its own special lessons that are of great importance to the soul. Though seemingly separated from the goddess, each of these souls remains always attached to her, always a part of her, for it is through them, as part of them, that the goddess entered into her own physical creation, the God, who are one with the goddess, and our experiences are her experience. We are eternal and immortal as souls, never cut off from the goddess or spirit, only differentiated. All of the powers and abilities of the goddess are within us and at our command if we can clear our vision enough to see and access them. Descending through the planes of existence was like going through a curtain or veil. The veil obscures our vision of the things above us. Because of the veil, we forget that we are part of the goddess, that we are spiritual beings experiencing the physical, and we start to think that we are simply physical beings. As we ascend the planes, we are highly aware of those planes that are below us, and we perceive them fairly easily. It is much harder to perceive the planes above us. From where we are, it is difficult for us to see or communicate with the higher planes of consciousness, and it is easy to imagine that what our eyes perceive is all that exists. To progress, we must part the veil and see beyond it. The more we work magically and psychically, the thinner that veil becomes. Some people are born with the veil already very thin. These people are said to be born old. It may seem that those who are born old don't have to work as hard to progress, and that the psychic and magical skills just comes naturally to them. This is because they have already done the work to develop these skills in previous lifetimes. It is generally said that we are currently on the mental plane, able to easily perceive mental, emotional, and physical energies. It is also said that we are, and have long been, in the process of moving into the astral or into intuitional plane, and thus have increasing perception of what we might loosely call psychic matters. Though we have some perception of the planes beyond this, it is difficult to see very much of them from our current perspective. Of course, as in all things, there are a variety of points of view on the subject of the planes or spheres of existence. And this was then the Correllian view. So thank you, and sorry for the way I read it, but I hope it gave someone something. Much love.